Welcome to episode 82. I'm joined by Tim Price here, and we're jumping in today to talk about why sharing your dreams for the ministry can have great benefits. Welcome to the Worship Leader Toolbox podcast, where our mission is to equip local church worship leaders and teams in practical components of local church leadership. We'd be honored to have you share, rate, or subscribe. And if you have questions, we'd love to connect at worshipleadertoolbox.com. We're thrilled to have you listening to our podcast, and our prayer is that it's helpful to you and your ministry team. Let's head now to today's episode. Hey, Tim, how's life going?
Oh, it's going great. I'm glad that we have an opportunity to meet together today, Dave. And one weird new thing that I'm trying is an app that I'm learning before the new year begins. And because I want to try to keep track of these three different hats that I wear in life, working in harvest ministry, working at our church, and doing this sort of hobby of podcast and ministry leadership resources. So I downloaded an app so I can start it, basically just clock in and clock out on different, like, divided out departments of ministry life. So I'll see how that goes. But yeah, that sums up your life, is what you do each hour.
It also sums up life in general to know that there's an app for that.
Yeah. That's hilarious. Yeah, I mean, I didn't research it very long or anything. The app is just called Homebase. I think nice. It's a little freebie, but I mean, you could get the whole big thing, but I'm just going to do the free version just to have my own. This is all for my own benefit. So yeah.
That's good.
How's stuff going for you?
Oh, it's going good. We're finishing up some Christmas things. We've had our music all selected for all this time, but with Christmas music, you have these different versions, and yeah, the key you're going to sing and everything. But are you doing the Chris Tomlin version of this song, or are you doing the old-fashioned hymn with a twist? So figuring that kind of stuff out. I have to finish the chords for 2 more songs before Sunday.
Yeah, well, and that's that you're speaking everybody's language. And if you're not listening to this podcast during Christmas, then people still know the feeling of Christmas when you're working in music at the church. So yeah, it's pretty intense. Yeah. Or can be.
Well, let's ask a question. What are you reading right now?
I actually just this morning finished up my list. Every year since 2014, I've tried to read 50 books a year and try to put in 20 on the blog that I, want to highlight. And for whatever reason, that's just kind of motivated me to keep the discipline going. This year, I kind of tanked a little bit, and I'm not sure exactly the number of books that I read, but I made the list, got it all in there. I actually did 22, put a couple bonus ones in since it's 2022. And the book I'm reading right now is called When Women Lead by Carolyn Moore. I just picked it up in September at a conference. She's an author and a pastor and a speaker. And I'm reading it kind of on behalf of my own daughters. And, she's kind of focusing on her life as a minister serving in a church, but it's more general than that. It's just women in general leading. And whether that's leading in home or serving in church or, however it is, I'm reading on behalf of them. And after I get through it, I might pass it along to my oldest and say, read this.
Fantastic.
I'll have to see.
Yeah. So what's the answer to the question? When women lead, ... what happens? What's the
when
main
women
thing you
lead? Well, I guess if we have a minute to say it, there's the big burning question. What barriers do women leaders face, and what strategies will equip them to lead past those barriers so they can be effective? And so far, she's been talking about kind of her own journey and some of the practical stuff that is kind of hidden. And I like her approach. It's not like she's got an agenda-driven idea like, oh, poor us. Everybody needs to help us because we're women and we're like feel lower class or discriminated against or something like that. She basically just says we are seeking to lift up Jesus and the cross and the gospel message for the world in whatever aspect we're serving in. And we have to be confident in that because God created us male and female and needs people in both sexes to, help lead the church.
Amen.
So that's pretty cool.
All right. Well, Leanne and I got finished with that Gospel Treason book about the idols. And now we're on to Trusting God by Jerry Bridges. And I don't know anything about this author, but the subtitle on the back is "Why is it easier to obey God than to trust Him?" And it goes into a little bit about
Interesting.
We've just started it, but I can see in my own life. Oh yeah, I can be dutiful. I know how to be a good soldier and do my duty and do these several things that just need to be done. But trusting God is completely different than that. It's obedience out of a place of actual faith as opposed to religiosity.
Yeah. Wow, that's a lot of great stuff. You got some good books you come up with. And that phrase, dutiful, that I remember watching a musical or a play or something where the kids were talking to the old dad and asking about his marriage to their mother and asking him how he felt about her. And his response was, "Well, your mother is very dutiful." And I remember the play was like so sad because it's like they stayed married, they were committed, but it was more in a dutiful kind of way as opposed to like a loving kind of respect kind of way. And I heard that and I always thought, gosh, that makes you want to make sure you love your spouse and not just, I mean, it's good to stay committed whether you're feeling it or not, but it's sad to live your whole life without the heart. So that title, Obeying, Not Trusting, that's powerful.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Well, I don't know that I could read 50 books a year like you, but you got me thinking that I could probably do 12, like one a month would be a good goal. I may have to get into that.
And I say that like out of, I probably shouldn't like try to brag about that. I do keep a list. So I have a rolling list since, the last 7-8 years. And I just, at the beginning of the year, I just put all the months and I put 1 through 5 on each month. And I try just to complete it. And sometimes I have to read some little books, just to make it count. And some little biographies and stuff that Reuben Macy have about missionaries and whatnot. I'll just pull those out. And I also try to make sure that, if a book isn't catching me and I'm going to get stuck on it, I'll just, read through the whole thing quickly, look at all the chapter titles, look at all the headings, read a couple stories, and I'll call that reading it because I wasn't going to read the whole thing anyway. So
Gotcha.
I'm not like bound to the letter of the law on that. I just pick up a book and it feels like I got something from it and digest it a little bit. Then I call it read. And then some of them lock in. I read cover to cover and crank it out. And so, it's sort of a unique thing. And it was from a mentorship that I had. And basically they just challenged us to read a book a week during our internship. And so I did.
Cool.
Yep.
Well, we're going to talk today about dreams and visions for your ministry. I like the ideas here, the benefits of sharing dreams with your team. We're not talking like the dream you had last night, but more like your vision for the ministry, cool things that it could be, new ways of doing things. And Tim, you have a certain time frame which you really remember this happening in a tangible way. Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, and if you hear a lot of noise on my end, my family is busy making a lot of goodies for various celebrations coming up. So
I've got some noise on my end. I just heard a contractor using the saw a little bit. So this will just be a noisy podcast all again.
Yeah, who cares?
That's right.
The question, the time frame I remember this vision playing out. We had a certain season in our ministry about a decade ago now, but it's locked in my brain. We had a gymnasium and the church moved ahead on a vision to add a huge stage on one end, storage on each side, lights and new sound, and just kind of upgrade all that worship space. It was kind of the second worship space for our church outside of the sanctuary. And in a lot of ways became the primary space for any large gathering we have, plus worship services on Sundays. And one of the things that happened was the 7 years preceding this new stage upgrade, we actually set up 4x8 homemade platforms and pulled the sound system out from the wall and drug the drums and the band and the amps and the pulpit and everything out. We were basically a church plant in our own church. And we had worship down there. Every Saturday we'd set up, every Sunday we'd tear down. And so anytime something wasn't quite right, it seemed like we didn't do this intentionally, but if something didn't quite go right, we would kind of just blame it on the fact that, well, we got to set up every week. There's no way to make this great. Well, then we moved on to this new stage, and I remember distinctly, all of a sudden, the team stress went up a notch because I think everybody had this thought, oh no, this is us now. Like, this is for who knows how many years. And if we make a mistake now, it can't be blamed on the temporary setup or the fast Saturday setup or the lack of space around the building. We had to like live up to this new space that was created. And so, the vision and the dream got us to that point. And over the last decade, on much smaller scale, many other times, we've had other levels of that kind of thing. But I always just remember that, how the vision and the dream kind of helped raise the team up to a new level.
Nice. So sharing dreams and visions with your team is important. And here are some benefits. Number 1, builds a culture of vision.
Yeah, this list here is kind of interesting. Like all lists, I'm sure somebody could add to it. Hey, I do hear the song you're in now. That's cool. I hope the bathroom looks great after it's all done.
Oh, it's going to be great.
Yeah. Building a culture of vision. When you talk about dreams and future ministry, it begins to build a culture of people thinking ahead in your ministry. So, one of the things that I always think about in our church, which started in 1843, sometimes I just think, who were the people that started the church that I'm a part of right now? And they were sitting around probably in some home somewhere just with a dream in a little community to say, hey, we're going to get this church going. We're going to spread the gospel around this little region right here. And what kind of dreams and visions did they have? And really every church is a church plant at some point. And then every church is a church plant has to have some kind of vision for making it happen. And then I know there's life cycles for churches and ministries, but one of the saddest things is for a church to have had a passionate drive to do a mission and then all of a sudden lay back and kind of become like more of a cruise ship, just kind of hanging out, paying attention to its members only, not worrying about the gospel being spread out beyond the walls, all that type of stuff. So You've got to dream dreams for your ministry and help build a culture of everybody thinking, what else can we do? What's next? How are we going to keep this thing rolling? And so that's kind of the idea of culture. You don't want to just be the only one out there trying to cry out the vision. You want to kind of have a whole culture of that going.
Mm-hmm. I see it like a forest. So you have like little saplings coming up through the dirt and they're stretching out towards that light. And it's young, everything is, oops, hit my microphone. You just get higher and higher into above the forest, and then you start to grow the thickest part of the trees. And for the people that just want to kind of hang back, it becomes this old growth. It can die pretty quickly because of the disease that happens when you don't have that constantly new growth. Yeah. And so you have to prune it like you do, a gardener has to prune the plants. Otherwise they just don't do very well. So.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. We could write a little post on that, because if there's not room for the growth, or that's part of building the idea of making room for a vision to be shared. Mm-hmm. And if there's not room for that anywhere, then you kind of get stagnant pretty quick. So,
Well, number 2, it allows other people to add their gifts, which I love that, because I was kind of on a big kick about helping people find what their gifting is for a couple of years there. And I was inspired by a secular book. Excuse me. They made a movie about it. It's called Ender's Game. But I read that book back when I was a truck driver. And the main thing of this book is this outcast kid who's very, very smart was put into this school, this battle school that trains him for the military and things. And they wanted him to be a leader, but they gave him all of the throwaway kids. Well, they were throwaway kids because those other team leaders had no idea what they were capable of and what their gifts were. They only wanted them to fit into a mold. So the main character finds what these individual gifts are of these throwaway kids, makes them the best team because he has found what they are actually good at doing. And so
that's really good. I mean, that basically sums up a little bit of this point of lets other people add their gifts in. So the more the vision's out there, the more people can say, oh, I could take part in this. Mm-hmm. And I keep there's just a kind of a rolling thing of that going on in ministry. You can just kind of see it, especially when you're looking for it. But I really noticed that anytime we have to do any practical stage designing, like you kind of sketch out the picture, a few people look at it, and pretty soon you got this guy throwing in this, and this lady's helping do that, and pretty soon it's done. And so without that vision, nobody knows how their gifts can be utilized.
Yeah.
So that's important.
Definitely.
That's a good movie. I should take a look at that.
Well, I don't think they did it justice. Like any movie, they try to compact a large book into just 2 hours or whatever. And there's a little bit of language and things, but it's inspirational. That's one of my favorites.
That's cool.
Well, number 3 helps uncover passion in people.
Yeah, and we may not have to spend too much time on this because it's similar to uncovering their gifts and allowing them to add it into it. But whenever you share a dream for something to go on in your ministry, then you can begin to notice the excitement from others as they start talking. So for an example, I don't know if they'll be listening to this podcast or not, but I heard somebody in our ministry talk about how they love Christmas and how during COVID, since nobody was able to go to their house anyway, they just left their Christmas tree up all year because they love it so much. And so I heard that and I thought, oh, well, we need to have a Christmas party, so let's have you do it. And I invited them to do it, and they said, oh, they'd love to. And they planned it and had an awesome, amazing Christmas party. And it was all because, it wasn't like a major dream or vision, but we definitely had a dream to do a Christmas party that wasn't me just saying, okay, let's eat lunch and say Merry Christmas and leave. And so it uncovered that passion.
Nice.
It's like a tiny little example.
Yeah. I think people's gifts and passions are tied together because you're not really passionate about something that you're not gifted in necessarily. I mean, you might want to support somebody else because you believe in them and you love them or whatever. But a person's passion, I think, has to be tied to their gifts. Yeah.
Yeah. And man, I need to find this. It won't even do us justice to try to explain it, but there's like a Venn diagram where it's your passion and your gifts. And the third one is, your productivity, how you can make money. And if you can get those 3 things to line up, your skills, your passion, and your way you make a living, when the middle section is set, then you're really locked in. But anyway, that's part of that.
Yeah, I have to lean over my sound curtain here and look over this thing that Leanne put on my wall. Frederick Buchner, you know that guy?
Sounds familiar, but I'm not sure.
He's an author. She printed me this off. The place where God calls you is the place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet.
Ooh, that's a good quote. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah. Well, number 4 helps draw people to the team.
Yeah, a team with a vision. If you have a big vision and a dream for your ministry in some sense, then you're going to have more people. Like if you could do the vision with what you have, then it's not really a vision. It's just daily activity. So if you dream of a worship team that's led by somebody, you're going to need to find somebody that is going to step in and be the leader. And so without that, the vision is like the first step to including more people, finding more people, and recruiting more people, because that becomes your goal. So sometimes in ministry, we get an idea and we think we got to do it. And sometimes you just need to put it in the oven and just wait for God to send the right person to do it. Otherwise, you're going to get so maxed out with a million different directions that nothing's going to be effective. So I've experienced that too.
Yeah.
So we want to definitely draw people in, and that's part of dreaming dreams for your ministry.
Good. Well, before we get to the last 2, let's take a quick moment to thank our sponsor for this episode, Don Satterley and Pro Alarm. If you're a pastor or a worship leader in our local area, you may benefit from a conversation with Don regarding security, cameras, keypad entry, and more. You can get all that info at proalarm.net. Now, Tim, I have to ask you, is it pro-alarm.net or is that their name?
It's actually just proalarm.net, no dash.
Okay, no dash.
Yeah.
Okay. So
and I'm not even sure if their name has a dash, but who knows?
Okay. So proalarm.net.
Yep.
We're back and continuing into our last 2 benefits to sharing the vision for ministry. Number 5 gives your team and leaders hope.
Yeah, and if you have a thought about this, I mean, this is like the inspirational part of this whole thing, because there is a lot of hard work that goes into ministry. It's not just like Sunday mornings for 60 minutes. It's a lot of details, a lot of planning, discipleship, conversations, phone calls, thinking, praying, and it's a lot of plugging away, even though you have some lingering tough stuff that seems to always be, on the sidelines. But when your team members can see the light at the end of the tunnel, or they can, know that they're heading in this direction that's going to be successful, then they will slog through and they'll keep the momentum going just based on knowing what's at the end. And so I already gave one example of that, but when we were setting up every week, kind of almost like a church plant would do in a rented space, it was a little bit hard to stay motivated to do that, and even hard toward the end to get people to even want to do it. But once the new vision came into play and we knew what we were heading towards, then all of a sudden everybody was on it. And so I guess the idea of hope is that a dream or a vision, when it's held high, it makes the work easier. So
you said that word momentum, and that got me thinking. The vision is sort of this pulling force, and people's passion is sort of a pushing force, and you work those together, and then all of a sudden you're flowing.
Yeah, that's good. The vision is the pulling force, and passion force is the pushing, is the passion. Yeah, and if you can get people lined up that way, that's like dynamite.
Yeah. I'm a little more deep this week because I gave up coffee.
How does that work? How are you more deep because you gave up coffee?
Well, I was having some digestive problems, some heartburn things, and I just decided it was time to give it up. And I had a couple of days where I had struggled a little bit, but now for some reason, I'm thinking more clearly, and I'm a little more relaxed, and I kind of like it. So I'm in a little deeper place.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
Well, good going.
On to number 6, help you stop doing so much of the ministry yourself.
And this one is also a huge benefit of this vision dream sharing. And I think that there's a lot of people who serve in ministry are doers in some sense. And it's also hard in worship ministry because it's hard to hand off, the idea of the direction you're going with people with different gifts. And I know God, uses all of us, the whole church is kind of together in this goal. But I've just found it most difficult to teach worship leaders and to teach tech people, because the people that are doing those two roles usually just do it without thinking too much. They just are, cranking it out just based on who they are. And so there's a temptation for every ministry staff person, volunteer or paid, just to do it. And the problem with that is that, one, you take the joy away from people who may have gifts or need gifts to be built up in that area. You kind of run the risk of burning yourself out because you're doing it all and starting to get bitter toward the church with an attitude that says, how come nobody else will help, whenever you haven't actually put in the time to invite people into the dream and vision of more people helping. And it also will stifle growth, because no one person can crank up an entire successful and effective ministry in any department, worship or otherwise. And so one awesome and probably maybe the most important added benefit of sharing the vision with your church and people in your church is to plant seeds of growth in other people, and really being a person who equips the saints and not just, hoarding it. And that's really going to just make a huge difference. And so, this vision sharing it's not always standing up at the pulpit saying, here's the big grand vision. Sometimes it's just talking to somebody saying, hey, it'd be awesome if you could come weekly and help us do this thing. If you're here anyway, you have authority to do it. If you're up for that, I'd love to have you do it. That's sharing a dream and a vision, and people will respond to those conversations.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. How often should you share a vision? And you just mentioned two ways: standing up in the pulpit, and also just one-on-one. But the idea of even sharing it in the first place, how would you go about deciding when to share, how to share, that kind of thing?
Well, that's a great question. And one of the old pastors, not old pastors, but one of the famous pastors out there had a quote that was all over the place for many years. And the quote was, vision leaks. And so if you share a vision, then everybody gets back in the daily grind. They're going to forget it. So vision can't be a January 1st type statement and then wait again until 12 months later to do it. And so my thought would be you share the dream and the vision as often as you can. So that's why churches have like their own little crafted mission statement, all of which branch off of, Matthew 28, go into all the world. But they kind of have that so that they can remind themselves that this is what we're here to try to accomplish. So the number of ways, that might be another podcast too. I should really make notes whenever I say it should be a podcast, but you ought to do it in ways that different people will respond to it. So individual conversations is a dream and vision sharing, especially if you have like a dream or vision you want to share. And small groups. So if you're hanging out with a couple sound guys and you're talking about what cables we need to run. I did this on Wednesday night. I don't know anything about what cables we need to run, but I sat in the sanctuary for an hour and 15 minutes the other night till about 10:30 p.m. just talking with the tech guys about what's next. And then the writing and publications, anytime you can put a vision out for, social media. I think you do it as often as possible in as many different ways as possible. And to kind of put that into your own heart and mind that part of your job as the leader, whether you're volunteer or paid, is to share the vision and the dream for the ministry. And it doesn't mean that it doesn't have to be the one big single vision. It could be little dreams, just like, hey, we got to redecorate. We got to make this cool. We got to learn this new song. Whatever the dream is for like what's going to be great next week, next month, or next year, you put that out there.
That's great.
Yeah.
Hey, you said that's going to get edited out. You said every time you say, hey, we should make a podcast, you said you should take notes. That got me thinking, people listening right now, what if they had an idea that they'd like to hear you say? How can they send that to you?
Yeah, well, you mean if somebody had an idea for an episode or a question? Well, if you actually go to, so there's two ways to do this. That's an awesome thought. If you go to anchor.fm/the Worship Leader Toolbox Podcast, or if you just go to our website, podcast, you can get to Anchor, which is where we put these podcasts through. And within that, there's a spot there that you can actually hit the button and leave us a voicemail. So you don't even have to type anything. You can just leave us a message. And if you leave us a message with a question, we will put it on an episode and we'll answer the question. And we'd love to have your voice on here, and we'd love to hear your question and give us something to talk about. And otherwise, if somebody had a question, they could just email us. And the email is on worshipleadertoolbox.com.
Okay. Well, it's appropriate that this is called Toolbox because you can hear the equipment running in the background.
That's true.
That's all right. That's only today. We want to take a moment and thank each person who has listened to this podcast and want to remind you that you can find the blog post along with other resources at worshipleadertoolbox.com. And we'll see you next time. Hey, you said that's going to get edited out.